The squadron that should have fallen, they think bombers disappear in fire. They don't. Not really. They come back torn open and still breathing. They limp home on one engine, with hydraulic fluid bleeding down the belly, plexiglass shattered, control cables half severed, tires flayed to threads, radios coughing static through burned wiring. They come back, carrying flak in their ribs and frost in the gun turrets and blood on the interphone switches. And then they stop on the hardstand under blackout lamps, engines ticking as they cool, and everyone looks at the aircrew, but not at you, because the public version of war lives in the sky. The photographs, the headlines, the medals, the missing man formations. Up there, history has faces. Down here, in the maintenance line, it has hands, split knuckles, blackened fingernails, fingers cut open on jagged aluminum, hands that learn how to lift life out of dead machines and bolt it into the living before dawn. That is where you live, not in glory, in continuity. Your job is not to build, not to admire, not even to repair in the clean, honest sense of the word. Your job is to keep a bomber squadron flying with salvaged parts, which means you inherit a fleet already dying and teach it how to outlive expectation. That is the first lie of your profession. People think maintenance is about mechanics. It is about triage. It is about deciding, in darkness, what can be saved, what can be stolen from the broken, and which aircraft gets the piece that means the difference between a successful sortie and a burning field in enemy territory. By the time you understand that, you are already inside the system, and the system does not promote you because you love airplanes. It promotes you because you can look at wreckage and still see tomorrow. Stage 1, the Boneyard at the beginning. They send you to the place no one talks about with any affection, the edge of the field, the scrap perimeter, the Boneyard. Rows of aircraft sit there with their noses slumped and their wings half removed. Rainwater pooled in bomb bays, fabric covers torn loose and snapping in the wind like surrender flags. Some were wrecked on landing. Some took flak over the target and never truly recovered. Some were stripped last month and stripped again this morning, because need has a longer memory than paperwork. This is where you learn the first real skill, seeing value where everyone else sees ruin. A hydraulic pump still sealed against corrosion, a magneto that can be bench tested, landing gear actuators, oxygen regulators, pressure gauges, engine cowl latches, generator couplings, a propeller governor that looks dead until it's cleaned, measured, and spun under a lamp. 1,000 small organs harvested from a body the squadron has already stopped naming. Outsiders misunderstand this stage completely. They imagine salvage as scavenging, rough and improvised, half desperation and half luck. But the work is exacting. You catalog serial numbers. You tag conditions. You inspect for stress fractures with eyes so tired they sting. You learn that a salvaged part is not free. It arrives carrying the unknown history of the aircraft it came from, overheat cycles, micro cracks, corrosion hidden under paint. Damage no one logged because the man who noticed it is now dead over a black coastline. That is the hidden cost of the Boneyard. Nothing you touch is innocent. Every part has already survived something. And if you fit it wrong, trust it too easily, or sign your initials to a lie you want to believe, the part does not fail here beside you on the ground. It fails later, at altitude, over enemy guns, with 10 men inside. So at this level, you stop thinking of airplanes as machines and start thinking of them as negotiations with probability. You learn restraint, suspicion, patience. You learn that war is not only destruction, it is forced reuse. It is a civilization of shortages pretending to be a machine of abundance. And each night, the Boneyard grows, which means you are getting better because the world is getting worse. Stage 2. The line, then they move you closer to the aircraft that still have a future. Now, you work the line, the operational hard stands, the refuel points, the revetments, the places where the bombers sit in staggered rows like exhausted animals waiting for orders they cannot refuse. Here, the pace changes. In the Boneyard, you could think. On the line, you calculate while moving. A bomber lands at 1400 with flak damage across the port wing route, a dead radio compass, and an engine throwing metal in the oil screen. It must be ready by 0400. The crew chief wants answers in minutes. Operations wants certainty in hours. Supply wants forms. You have none of the parts they're asking for. Not new ones. So the real progression at this stage is not technical. It is temporal. You learn to work inside the shrinking corridor between landing and launch. You learn how long it takes to pull a supercharger assembly under bad light, how quickly a cracked manifold can be swapped if two men hold the cowling and a third ignores the skin missing from his palm. You learn to listen to the engine after replacement, because machines tell on themselves if you pay attention. A rough ignition note, a vibration in the mount, an oil leak that appears not as a spill but as a shine. Most people think the line is where skill becomes visible. It doesn't. It becomes compressed. Anion can replace a component with a manual open on a clean bench and a full day ahead. What matters here is whether you can do it under winter rain, under orders, under fatigue, under the knowledge that the aircraft's crew is sleeping in their hut because they trust you enough to close their eyes. That trust is the pressure you did not understand when you started. It changes the weight of every wrench in your hand. Here, too, you discover the politics of readiness. Aircraft are not just machines, they are priorities made physical. One bomber gets the best magneto because tomorrow's target is strategic. Another waits because its crew is already short 2 men and command quietly expects losses. The squadron board lists availability in chalk, but beneath the chalk are arguments, rivalries, estimates, and quiet acts of favoritism performed in the language of necessity. You are not outside that system anymore. You are inside the arithmetic of who flies and who waits. And that arithmetic stains you faster than grease, because when parts are scarce, repair is no longer merely mechanical judgment. It becomes moral judgment dressed in technical language. Stage 3. Cannibal night. After that comes the phase that separates mechanics from custodians. Cannibal night. The shift after the shift, the unofficial economy. The hours when a bomber is declared non-operational for long enough to become inventory with wings. This is where your reputation begins to rise, because not everyone can do this well. Too much hesitation, and live aircraft sit grounded. Too much aggression, and you strip a platform that could have been recovered. The difference is experience, nerve, and something darker, the willingness to take apart one future to preserve another. This is when rank begins to mean responsibility instead of seniority. You are trusted with decisions that don't announce themselves as permanent, but often are. Which aircraft gets sacrificed? Which damage is cosmetic enough to tolerate? Which fuel system contamination can be flushed and monitored? And which one will kill a crew in the climb? Which cracked bulkhead can wait 48 hours? Which one is a coffin in disguise? The work becomes surgical, panels off, wiring harnesses tagged, fasteners lined in oil-stained trays, components lifted by flashlight while the wind pushes cold through your jacket and someone nearby is using a pry bar on a dead ship that still smells faintly of burned insulation and cordite. You know the aircraft by their serials now, but also by their personalities. The nose-heavy one with the constant starboard brake problem. The veteran bird with 3 patch plates and a temperamental turbo. The replacement airframe that looks factory fresh, but vibrates like bad news above 18,000 feet. Outsiders call this ingenuity. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is organized decay. That is what they misunderstand about this level. They imagine salvage as evidence of toughness, of wartime brilliance, of making do with less. And there is some truth in that. But there is another truth under it. Salvage only becomes a doctrine when supply has failed, when industry is too far away, when shipping lanes are vulnerable, when demand has outrun replacement, when the system has quietly accepted that some planes will keep flying, not because they should, but because they must. And the hidden cost arrives in your mind before it arrives anywhere else. You start seeing aircraft as inventories instead of companions. That bomber over there is no longer simply damaged. It is 2 good hydraulic lines, 1 serviceable radio rack, a usable throttle quadrant, and maybe a bomb release solenoid. If the wiring hasn't cooked, you begin dividing the living and the dead with a detached efficiency that would have horrified you months ago. This is how systems teach survival. Not by making you cruel, by making cruelty feel procedural. Stage 4. The chief's table eventually. If you are good enough and do not break first, You stop spending all your time under wings and inside nacelles. You are brought into the room before the room. The hut with the maintenance board. The table with the coffee rings, grease smears, and sortie schedule. The place where commanders ask impossible questions in calm voices. How many can you give me by dawn? Not how many are perfect. Not how many are safe in any absolute sense. How many can you give me? At this stage, what changes is scale. You are no longer responsible for a part or even an aircraft. You are responsible for readiness as a moving percentage, fleet health, failure trends, turnaround times, consumable shortages, deferred maintenance risk, whether your ground crews are sharp enough to catch a cracked exhaust stub after 18 sleepless hours, whether your best electrician is about to make his first fatal mistake because his hands have started shaking when he lights a cigarette. This is where authority becomes lonelier than ambition ever looked from below. Most people imagine promotion as relief from labor. In war, promotion often means distance from the satisfying honesty of labor and proximity to compromise. You miss the certainty of bolts torqued to spec, parts fitted clean, leaks found and fixed. At the table, nothing is that clean. Every decision is contaminated by incomplete information and operational pressure. The weather is closing. The target has changed. 2 aircraft are overdue from today's mission. 3 crews are replacements. Supply says the shipment has not come through. Higher command wants numbers, not explanations. And so you learn the language leaders use when there are no good options. Acceptable risk, localized fatigue. Monitor closely. Return to base if able. The phrases sound neutral. They are not neutral. They are how institutions spread burden across paper until it becomes survivable enough to sign. This is the hidden cost of command in maintenance. You stop merely fearing failure and begin allocating it. A young fitter asks if a salvaged boost controller should go into lead 2 or spare reserve. He thinks he is asking a technical question. He is asking whose crew gets the better chance. You answer in 10 seconds and live with it for 10 years, because this level teaches the final truth outsiders never see. Bomber squadrons are not kept flying by metal alone. They are kept flying by human beings deciding, again and again, where to place the weakness. Stage 5. The squadron lives on borrowed time by now. The squadron has a reputation, not for comfort, not for beauty, for persistence. Aircraft other units would write off are still making the runway here. Bombers with skin patches over older skin patches, engines built from mixed pedigree, control surfaces aligned by men who can cite straightness better than gauges can prove it. Your crews call them dependable with the black humor reserved for things that have disappointed death too many times. This is the elite stage, though no one says it that way. You are the unit people visit when they want to know how you are still generating sorties at this rate. They expect a trick, a hidden cache, better tools, a favored pipeline. They do not understand that the answer is uglier and less flattering, discipline, theft from the dead, and a workforce that has forgotten what rested judgment feels like. What changes here is not only your competence, it is your relationship to illusion. You know exactly how thin the margin is. You can stand at dispersal in the pre-dawn dark and watch ground crews pulling chocks, hear engines coughing into synchronized thunder, and understand that what looks to an outsider like power is, underneath, a masterpiece of managed fragility. Each aircraft that taxis out is an argument you have made against entropy. Some arguments are stronger than others. All of them are temporary, and yet the squadron flies, day after day, mission after mission. That is the seductive part. Success, repeated often enough, begins to disguise the price of success. Command sees sortie rates. Aircrews see aircraft ready at launch. History later may see tonnage dropped and targets struck and dates on a map. What it will not naturally see is what constant salvage does to the people maintaining the illusion, the blurred judgment, the normalization of defect, the way your men stop flinching when they hear the phrase good enough for one more trip. Most people misunderstand endurance. They think it proves health. Sometimes endurance is just damage delayed. That is the burden of this stage. You are no longer merely preserving machines. You are preserving belief. Belief in the squadron, belief in the schedule, belief that one more mission can be made to happen without demanding a price beyond what has already been paid. But war keeps accounts even when men do not, and eventually it comes to collect. Stage 6. The last count the end does not arrive as a grand collapse. It arrives as accumulation. Too many old airframes. Too many engine hours. Too many patched spars, scavenged pumps, rewired panels, deferred replacements, absent names on the roster. The Boneyard is fuller now, but leaner. You have taken its best organs. What remains is mostly carcass. Supply finally improves in some places and fails in others. Newer aircraft appear, but not fast enough to erase the habits scarcity taught you. The younger men treat salvage as normal because they inherited your world after it was already bent. And you, if you have lasted this long, understand something terrible. The squadron did not survive in spite of cannibalization. It survived because of it. That is the final stage. Not mastery, accounting. You walk the line at night and see not aircraft, but layers of decision preserved in aluminum and steel. A flap actuator from one bomber. A carburetor linkage from another. A seat harness from a wreck. No one mentions. Rivet lines like scar tissue. Paint in mismatched shades where urgency outran vanity. Every flying machine on the field is now a collective body built from the remains of its own dead. There is something almost medieval in it. Something ancient. A warrior army reforging broken armor by firelight, sending it back out before dawn because dawn does not care what state the armor is in. And beneath the system's hard competence lies the cost that cannot be entered on any maintenance form. You have learned to speak to widows in half-truths when they visit the base chapel. You have learned to keep your face still when an aircraft you signed off does not come back. Even when the loss was flak, weather, navigation, enemy fighters, anything but your work. You have learned that guilt is irrational but durable. That sleep, when it comes, often arrives with the metallic smell of hydraulic fluid still in your nose. That men who salvage aircraft long enough begin to salvage themselves the same way piece by piece, provisionally, never entirely convinced the next failure won't be terminal. This is what outsiders never understand. You are not simply keeping bombers in the air. You are extending a system beyond its natural lifespan by feeding it with fragments of itself. It is efficient, necessary, brilliant, sometimes. It is also a kind of slow consumption. By the end, you no longer believe in perfect machines. You believe in margins, habits, inspections, disciplined suspicion, and the stubbornness of skilled hands. You believe in crews who trust maintenance more than speeches. You believe in checklists, stained dark from rain and oil. You believe in the cold hour before sunrise when the engines catch, one by one, and for a moment it sounds less like machinery than resurrection. Then the aircraft taxi out. Then the darkness swallows the runway lights. Then the sky takes back what the ground has loaned it. And when the mission is over, if the mission is over, they will look first for the crews, because that is where the story always goes. But you will already be watching the wheels, the engine note, the way the aircraft settles on its struts, the fresh holes in the fuselage, the panel that's hanging loose, the stain spreading under the nacelle. You will already be calculating what can be saved, what can be stripped, what flies tomorrow, because that is the final shape of the job, not victory, not restoration, continuance. A bomber squadron kept alive by salvage is never truly healthy. It is simply moving, and movement in war is often mistaken for strength. You know better. You know that strength, at this level, is the ability to keep choosing under shortage without allowing shortage to make you careless. It is the discipline to respect a salvaged part without trusting it blindly. It is the burden of deciding which machine inherits the last good component and which one becomes a donor before its metal is even cold. And if there is any dignity in that world, it is not clean. It is earned in darkness, in restraint, in the quiet refusal to let collapse arrive on schedule. So when people speak about bombers, about campaigns, about the weight of explosives, and the range of engines and the courage of men above the clouds, they are not wrong. They are just incomplete. Because somewhere beyond the photographs, beyond the medals, beyond the official language of sorties and losses, there is a maintenance line under dim lamps where war reveals its truest habit, Nothing is wasted. Not steel, not men, and certainly not the dead.